With the bye week upon us, there's only one team to scout. It's Vandy.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, we will indeed take an early look at Bama. They have a major test versus Georgia this weekend. But first, bye weeks are important because it gives the organization a chance to look inward and do a little self-scouting. So there's a lot to look at here with Vandy. There's a lot to, based on the first 4 weeks. Yesterday we talked about bowl chances and aspirations, youth movements, and everything like that. But now we just need to take a look at the operation as a whole and just try to kind of figure out what's going well, what's not going well, all of that stuff. So we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, okay? Because I'm an offensive-minded guy and I like to attack, so we'll start there, okay? But Diego Pavia is the centerpiece. We know that. They're trying really hard to look for an extra year of eligibility for him, by the way. Read that on 247, Vandy 247. That would be amazing if they could find an extra year of eligibility for him. It's highly unlikely, probably a long shot, but they're going to look into it because they want him back. Pavia wants to be back, and he's been great for this program. So if they can find an extra year of eligibility, maybe that's a little bit of self-scouting that Vandy's legal department and compliance department can find for him. Maybe that might be the greatest piece of intel that they could get this entire season is to give Diego Pavia an extra year of eligibility. It's going to come down to like his JUCO. Is it going to count as a JUCO, or are they going to look at it as post-secondary, which doesn't count towards your college eligibility clock? So there's a lot to unwind or unpack there. So stay tuned for that. But I wanted to put that on y'all's radar thanks to Robbie Weinstein of Vandy 247. So that's a great piece of information. So, looking at the self-scout, man, looking at, it's always a great time to reflect. As a coach, as an offensive coordinator, the bye week couldn't come in a better time every year. And it was different times, and same story. You get a chance to really look at what's going on, personnel-wise, what changes do you need to make? And luckily, teams with the new playoff system, they get 2 bye weeks this year. So this will be bye week number 1. So it'll give them a chance to kind of revamp after the first 4 games, where the first 2 were amazing. The second 2 results weren't great, but the effort was there, and there's some things to clean up. But personnel-wise, I think there's a chance to really kind of do some things that are special to kind of really jolt this team into into something that can be a little bit more effective down the stretch, because they've got before their bye week, they've got a nice stretch of games. And when I say nice stretch, I mean that very sarcastically. It's going to be a hard stretch. They've got Bama, they've got Kentucky, they got Ball State, and they got Texas, and I believe Auburn before they are off again. So a 5-game stretch of those teams before they're off again, and then they finish the season South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee. So this is going to be, these moves that they make in the bye week, some of the things that they're thinking about, some of the things that I think they may be thinking about or should be thinking about could end up making a massive difference in the season as they get down the stretch run. So offensive line, I think they're doing pretty well. The strong side, quick side thing is going pretty well. I just think there's some guys that, needs a little bit of shakeup. Like I think Cade McConnell could see an opportunity somewhere. Maybe he could see strong guard. You could see, maybe the strong tackle being replaced as well. You could see some things happening there. There might be some shakeup as they try to figure out, and it might just be as simple as changing up one thing or here or there in the scheme in pass pro, because I don't know if Vandy's thrown enough to really get enough live looks at pass rush for them to be good at it. And so that's just something they have to work on is pass pro, getting the calls right. Understanding, I think it's still where the strong side and quick side thing kind of gets tricky is where you have, where do you set your protection to? Because your fast side is going to be what you want your best matchups to be. So you'll want to try to formationally call it to where the quick side is on the quarterback's blind side. But can you always do that? Like that's where it gets kind of interesting, because you have to kind of look at what you're seeing there as far as pass pro goes, as far as what matchups there are, what personnel you have. Like maybe the personnel is not quite right. Like there's just some things that you have to kind of consider as you're designing your scheme. And it could just be scheme related. It could just be experience related. These guys haven't played together, but for 4 games, really. So like that takes a little bit of time. But something to get a spark within this offensive line, something to make sure that they can get an inside run presence, get Diego Pavia protected so he's not running for his life every time he drops back the pass. Like there's some things that you can put in place that will help with all of that. So I'm excited to kind of see what they do along the offensive line, developing those guys. Fundamental work is very key in the bye week as well. The wide receiver position, we talked about a couple of young guys that could get in on the action, but like, again, reshuffling the deck there to try to get some people involved would be tremendous. Joseph McVay, I talked about him yesterday. He's somebody that you need to get involved. He's going to be really, really good for you. I think he's going to be electric. Darian Wiley is somebody that needs to be able to get in the rotation somehow. He's somebody that came in with a lot of promise coming in from Louisiana Monroe. He's been kind of beat up, banged up, soft tissue stuff. He hasn't really been much of a factor, if at all. So somebody you need to really get involved there. Junior Sherrill, I think it's time for him to go to the slot. I don't think he's making much of an impact on the outside. I think he's got to go into the slot so he can kind of really make a difference along the inside and in the middle of the defense, in the middle of the field, and crossing routes and things that he does really well. And so, those are some personnel shakeups that I think will be, beneficial for this offense. But scheme wise, I think, for this offense, if I'm self-scouting, I think you have to involve some more motions in there. I saw a play in the Bills game, which I think would be interesting. I don't know if Coach Beck is looking at this, but it would kind of fit our scheme. But there was a play where Khalil Shakir of the Bills, he went in orbit motion, and then he went like he was going in orbit motion, turned back around like he was going back where he came from, and then as soon as the ball was snapped, he stuck his foot in the ground and went back like in orbit motion. And so it was kind of like a triple fake there. It was a really cool motion. It was an RPO built on it, but it was probably more of like a play action screen, but it looked like an RPO. And he was wide open. He got, 12, 13 yards just like that easily before anybody even threatened to touch him. So like just certain things with like motions and having counters off of counters, having, throw in some passing scheme that takes advantage of what personnel we have. Like we have good crossing route people. We have good quick game people. And now with Joseph McVay, we do have a shot player. So this is going to be one of those situations where, you look at, okay, well, teams struggle when we do this. Teams, we can manipulate the defense by doing X, Y, Z and putting this certain type of personnel in. I would like to see more 20 personnel with AJ Newberry and Cedric Alexander. I would love to see more of that. I think that would be really, really nice for this offense, especially as much as they run. I think some option things are in play. I think you could split those two guys out and empty. Both of those guys can really kind of get it done in the pass game. You can motion some guys out. You can run, counters, draws, all kind of stuff with the 20 personnel that's in the game. Those are two of your better players, and you're going to be run heavy. So this is something that, I think would be beneficial as well. But just some things to kind of, I don't think you need to overhaul anything offensively, personnel or scheme wise. I just think a few tweaks here and there to kind of keep you moving forward a little bit to where you're not stagnant and predictable. And now teams can just tee off on you because they know we get this certain look, we're going to get this motion and this play coming out of it. There's a lot of cool things. My favorite play before we switch to defense, my favorite play that I saw in the game was where quarterback and running back swapped, and then they handed it. So there was a play earlier in the season, I think it was against Virginia Tech, where Pavia and Alexander shifted, and Alexander took the snap and then handed it to Pavia. Pavia flipped it to Stowers, and Stowers ran. And then the other iteration was that, but Stowers pulled up and threw it. And then the next iteration, which was on Saturday, was they handed it to Pavia. Pavia faked the toss. They bid on the toss because they were running Pavia back towards the boundary and the reverse back to the field. It was going, if you're looking from the offensive perspective, it was to the offense right, fake left. The left was the field. And Pavia kept it. I think he ended up, I can't remember if he ended up throwing it or if he was intending on throwing it and ended up pulling it and running. Either way, freaking brilliant play because the defense, they keyed right in. They're like, okay, boom, they shifted. Okay, we're going to bump everything to the field because here they come. Here comes Stowers, and they were able to hit that play. And wrinkles like that, things like that can get the offense moving a little bit with a little bit of swagger is amazing. But the mindset, like I said yesterday, has been incredible around the organization. So we're heading into it. But the key to the defense. First thing is just get healthy. Second thing, they have some decisions to make or some possibilities within the scheme to get some guys in good positions to be able to make plays. We'll talk about all that next. All right. It's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. And that's none other than Diego Pavia. Roy is the new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week we selected Diego Pavia because he's somebody that just has such poise, and he is a competitor, and he just throws his body around without any regard. But he's amazing, and what he does for this team. The swagger of this team rests solely on him. Honorable mention to Brian Longwell, by the way. He's been incredible on the defense. But Pavia, I think for the first one, just the impact that he's had with the mentality of the team and the plays that he's made, the bomb that he threw. The way he just threw his body out there on the line in overtime, making plays, getting this offense going, being the leader of the offense. I think it's right that Diego Pavia is the first player of the week. Brian Longwell is amazing though. And I really like that. But if you're impressed as we were with the performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Diego Pavia is getting $100 on Roy. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. Everyone pitches in $10. It adds up fast for Diego Pavia or any player for that matter. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for Diego Pavia or any player for that matter in a standout performance this week, as we'll continue to bring to your program. Now, the player of the week is going to this week is not going to be anybody because it's a bye. So get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy, or support the players, change the game with Roy. All right. When you're hiring for small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get qualified candidates within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process even easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even faster and quicker. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. Welcome back. Locked On Vandy. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I appreciate it, especially you everydayers. Shout out to you. Make sure you check out Locked On SEC and make them your second listen as you take this magical mystery tour we call college football. It's going to be an interesting season. It's going to be interesting for Vandy, really. And I think this is a very pivotal week for what Vandy's trying to do for the stretch run. I think if they're going to make a bowl game, they've got to, they've got to kind of get some things together. They've got to get a plan. They've got to get some things in place and really get some people rolling. Okay. And first things first is they're going to have to hire Mr. Miyagi as the athletic trainer. His little trick of the, that thing where he heals you fast. They're going to need that, okay? Because they've got some guys beat up on defense, mostly along the defensive line. Corday Sidnor, he was limited, probably not as effective as he was in the Virginia Tech game because wasn't healthy, right? Not 100%. Zaylen Wood was a menace, and now he's beat up. He needs to get well. So there's some guys, and amongst others, that need to get kind of rested up and healthy to get back onto the field. So that's the first step that needs to happen for this defense. They need to get Sidnor and Wood back because those guys are an integral part of this defensive line. And with them, they bring juice, they bring fire, and they bring a ton of ability that allows these outside linebackers and inside linebackers to play free. They kind of make some things happen on the inside, and that brings a heck of a lot more athleticism and just speed and burst along that defensive line. They really do make a difference. Just watch Virginia Tech and watch Missouri and watch what happened in the run game in both of those games, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, and that's not a knock on the other guys, but those guys are just good, and they've made an impact, and they got some talent. So, again, it's not a knock on the guys that were playing. It's just those guys are slightly better. And speaking of which, this defense is going to have some questions to answer, okay? Because there's some, and I talked about it yesterday at safety, like you have to get Dante Carter involved, but how does that happen, okay? Like you can't just throw him in there and just expect to, you can't just sit DeRicky Wright. You can't sit CJ Taylor. You can't sit Brandon Fontenette to make room for those guys. Like you have to figure out a way for all of them to kind of coexist. I mean, Marlon Sewell might be he might be kind of the odd man out there, but I think you have to kind of do some things to where you get guys like I think it's important for this next run of games to get guys in positions to where they can succeed and fly around. Because if you don't have that, then you don't really have much of anything. If you don't have CJ Taylor playing his best football in his best position, he's not going to be effective. Same with DeRicky Wright. And if Dante Carter's athletic out there and can cover ground as a deep safety and you don't have him out there, it seems kind of irresponsible. But again, I think that with this defense and what Clark Lee has to face, like he has some veteran guys back there that can kind of understand what he wants to do, which is a good thing. But, also just having those guys out there is also beneficial. And having some athleticism on the back end is also beneficial because maybe you can play some more one high looks to where you play a little bit more man with help over the top because Dante Carter can cover some ground. Maybe you need CJ Taylor up near the line of scrimmage. Maybe maybe you do some sort of hybrid look to where him and Randon Fontenette are down closer to the line of scrimmage, and DeRicky Wright is a little bit deeper, but like you play kind of like everything condensed in, and you play like a one high safety. So you have kind of like, or you could do sometimes what some of these NFL teams do, where they disguise their 2 high safety look, where they have that stacked single high look, or like a guy in a robber position. That could be DeRicky Wright. Like he could play the boundary because he's a physically imposing force over there. He can run, but I just don't think he's a field type safety. I don't think he's somebody that is going to make a difference in coverage. He's more of kind of an all-around guy. He can help fill the void in the run game where you can fill down and then out. You need somebody, or have him on the outside, have him shaded outside so your inside linebackers can play more inside technique and just kind of scheme it to where you have everything bottled up and you kind of force everything to the outside. And if you can force running backs, especially if teams want to establish an inside run, if you can force those running backs to bounce and leak out the other side, leak out the C and D gaps, but they have to stop their momentum, I think it gives guys a chance to pursue, and it gives these defensive line a chance to kind of string things out to where the running backs don't really have much room to run. And so this is something that will allow the defense to get ahead on first down, stay ahead on second down, and set themselves up for getting off the field on third down. So this is, again, some changes that I was kind of thinking about, like brainstorming about, like what if they did this? What if DeRicky Wright was down low? What if they had like essentially a 3-5 look to where you have you have 3 of your guys are DBs, 3 of your 5 are DBs, and then you have the one single high look to where you would have like Longwell and Patterson on the inside, and then you have to the field side you have you have CJ Taylor and Randon Fontenette kind of layered to the outside, and then you had DeRicky Wright playing a little bit lower to the boundary side, and then you could, based on tendencies and formations and motions and how teams present to you, you could put CJ Taylor over and bump. You can give a true 2-shell, which would be Mel Kiper's worst nightmare. But there's a lot of different things you could do with that personnel. But I think you got to get your best 11 on the field, and you've got to get athletic guys that will come in and tackle, because teams are Vandy's starting to get stretched out a little bit. And when they get stretched out formationally, there's some things that happen where you get guys on an island and they're not quite as athletic. So it's just one of those things where it's going to be tough to kind of figure out what you want to do with that safety position, because like you have veteran guys that are playing fairly well, but it's not quite working. So you got to kind of have to figure out, okay, what is our best scenario? Okay, what is the ultimate absolute best scenario for our personnel? What guys do we need to put out there? What combination of guys do we need to put out there? Where do they need to be placed? How do we need to place it? Do we want to play more one high and just stick those guys down closer to the box to be able to bottle up run and quick passing game? Do we stick too high back there and have them play over the top on each of the hash marks, where you put Dante Carter to cover more ground over there? Like, what do you put Dante Carter down on a slot receiver and have CJ Taylor back deep, or DeRicky Wright back deep? And how do you organize the personnel? Dante Carter has to be involved. I think CJ Taylor needs to be closer to the box because he's a force in the run game. I think DeRicky Wright, as big and athletic as he is, he could play closer to the line of scrimmage, not like down tight on the line of scrimmage, but he could play closer in like a more of a robber position, boundary safety, kind of a guy that is just a menace in a small space, and can make a difference over there. So there's a lot of answers to be had. I think when you look at the defense, you have to figure out, okay, what is the best case scenario, and then go from there. Because you have some pretty good talent coming back on the defensive line off of injury. You have some linebackers that are making plays as well. So it's going to be an interesting look for Vandy's defense and what they can do. But all I know is this week there's no opponent, but next week you kind of look at their bowl hopes and say, okay, well, let's map out these opponents, and Bama's up next. We'll talk about them next. Talking about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, welcome back. We are wrapping up the show here on the Locked On Vandy podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. And some of you think I'm crazy for thinking Vandy still has a chance at a bowl game. Well, all I'm going to say is show me why, or tell me why. Why do you think? Leave that in the comments. Why do you think Vandy's chances at a bowl game are dead? Some people are like, "Oh, Vandy bowl game? Come on!" And I think it's people that's just like they still just think, "Oh, it's Vandy." It's just Vandy. It's Vandy. They're going to roll over. It's like a common thing. Like, oh, it's just Vandy. They're just going to, same old Vandy, which, they earned it, but I don't think it's true this year because Bama, yeah, that's probably a loss, but Texas is probably a loss. But, assuming, and I realize I can't assume anything with this group, but assuming they get Ball State, okay, they got to win 3 conference games, okay, and they got to beat Kentucky, Auburn, South Carolina, LSU. I think there's 4 right there for the taking. I'm a less of a believer in LSU by the week. I think their defense is sharp and soft. I think they can get that one. I really do. Beginning of the season, I didn't think so. Now, the way Vandy's playing, the way LSU's playing, we'll talk about that more later. I don't want to get into LSU right now, but let's look at Bama. It's probably a lesser chance of Bama. Bama's pretty dang good, okay? And that's a team that you hope you can get. You hope you can be competitive, but with this Vandy team, there's no surprises out there. There's no surprises. They were supposed to get destroyed against Missouri, but they didn't. So here it is. All right. Alabama's loaded with talent. Kalen DeBoer is an awesome coach. He did really well at Washington, got them in the title game last year with Michael Penix Jr. They are off and running right now. And if you ask Bama fans, the sky's falling because they're not blowing people out. But don't Bama fans, don't fool yourselves. This is a really good team. And this is an outstanding. They're still Alabama. They still have 5-star players. Let's not lose that sight. And they're recruiting really well because they're Alabama. That's what they do. So with Alabama, much like what you had with Luther Burden, you have to contend with Ryan Williams. He's the freshman wide receiver. We'll see how he plays against an elite defense in Georgia this weekend. So Bama, for Vandy fans, that's the game to watch right there. Georgia versus Alabama, because that's going to be kind of a glimpse of, okay, how are we going to size up against Bama? And then try to visualize what happened in that Missouri game and try to visualize it against Alabama, because Alabama's coming to First Bank Stadium. So keep that in mind. All right. But Ryan Williams is somebody you're going to have to contend with. Jalen Milroe, obviously, under the tutelage of Kalen DeBoer, who developed a quarterback who is similar to him in style, Michael Penix Jr. And this is going to be a team that's interesting because they're a well-balanced team, which means I'm not saying they're 50% run, 50% pass. That's not bounce. Bounce, I think they do a good job of spreading out, for the most part, spreading out around to their talent. Jalen Milroe is a quarterback that has elite athleticism, has a powerful arm, doesn't always know where it's going. Still think the game moves a little fast for him, but ultimately he's an extremely dangerous quarterback. And I think Kalen DeBoer is the type of head coach that knows exactly kind of how to scheme for that. Jan Miller and Justice Haynes is a nice 1-2 punch at running back, and that's going to be interesting to watch as they go up against this Alabama run game is going to go up against this Vanderbilt defense. So this is again, I'm a firm believer in teams that can win the line of scrimmage. I think Bama's just every bit as good at that, and as they were last year and as they've always been. So that's going to be a tough matchup there on both sides of the ball. They do a really, really good job. They do a fine job up front to kind of get you in some situations behind the sticks or behind behind the schedule, off schedule, either offensively or defensively. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. I think they're going to show a lot of who they are against Georgia. And for me, for my money on it, again, this is going to be a really, really tight game with Georgia and Alabama. And you're going to see kind of just, what they do with pressure, how they handle themselves at home. But you're going to see if this Bama team is the same old Bama team, which talent-wise they are, but execution-wise, with the new coach and a new way of doing things, are they really going to kind of be that team? So it'll be interesting to see, but just kind of a really early glimpse at Alabama. Well, I'll break the team down more in depth next week, but again, this is a team that, again, they're looking playoffs. So, but on Vandy's road to a bowl game, Bama is the next roadblock. Can they get through it? This is a tough one for me to say that they're going to win, but stranger things have happened, right? So, but anyway, maybe Kurt Page can go play quarterback again. He's the last one to beat him, so maybe he can suit up for one last run, couple good, loosen up the arm a little bit, get a few throws in there, and get Vandy on top, and maybe or just share some insight with Diego Pavia on how to beat those guys. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave you guys. Self-scouting is very, very important. And I do fully believe that Vandy still has the bowl game aspirations well intact. And the potential is there. The opportunity is there. They're playing like they want the opportunity. They just got to go out and get it and win the games that they have a chance of winning. They have to get over the hump. They have to make those kicks that they missed. They have to quit getting penalties. They have to do all these things to make bowl games possible. So, but anyway, that's all I got. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Peace.